This is the most in-depth survey on sexual violence conducted in this country since the 2002 study on sexual abuse and violence in Ireland, otherwise known as SAVI. Over 4,500 randomly selected people aged 18 and over responded to questions posed by the Central Statistics Office last year, and the survey shows that clear differences by age and sex were evident. The survey showed that over half of women reported that they experienced sexual violence in their lifetime, compared with 28% of men. In terms of age, around 65% of women aged between 18 and 24 said they experienced sexual violence in their lifetime, compared with 17% for men aged 65 and over. Just over half of the women who experienced sexual violence in their lifetime told someone about it, compared with a third of men. The data also shows that child sexual violence was experienced by men and women across all age groups, but young women reported the highest levels. For example, sexual intercourse with a child was reported by 10% of women aged between 18 and 24, compared with 2% of men in this age group. The aim of this survey is to inform policy and services for victims and survivors of sexual violence in this country. The CSO will publish further in-depth findings over the coming months. Joan O'Sullivan has been talking to one person who experienced sexual violence.
Chris was in his early 20s when he experienced sexual violence at the hands of someone he knew.
It had a huge impact on me for quite some time, and still does to an extent. Certainly in terms of forming relationships, in terms of being able to live a healthy sex life. I think those two things were big. I think trust was a big thing.
Some of today's survey findings in particular stood out for Chris.
One of the really notable things from today was that almost 80% of perpetrators are known to the survivors of the sexual violence, and I think that sort of breaks some of those myths that we have about people in dark alleys. And overall, it's less than half of people have disclosed their experiences of sexual violence. We are brought up as men to not be weak and to not show vulnerability, and I think being able to talk about having experienced sexual violence does require an element of being able to accept that, you were vulnerable and someone took advantage of that. And I think we have a huge amount of work to do to bring about a culture where everyone can talk about their experiences, where there's enough support and resources given to rape crisis centres and those essential services.
Today's survey was welcomed by a wide range of groups, including the National Women's Council, 1 in 4, and the Rape Crisis Centre.
1 in 2 women disclosed that they had experienced sexual violence. So what we've learned is a lot about how there is quite a big problem. But what we also can know now is we know a lot more about where it is, who experiences it, and that will help us in the rape crisis centres who deliver services. It will help people themselves to know they're not alone, and it will help government to plan better.
Chris spoke to his family and friends about his experience and got support from the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. He says just talking can itself be hugely beneficial.
Being able to just to not burden yourself with it, I think, is hugely important. Yeah.
Joan O'Sullivan, RTÉ News.
If you've been affected by the issues raised in the survey, help is available from the National Sexual Violence Helpline for men and women, the National Domestic Violence Helpline for women, and from Men's Aid Ireland.